We've got Marlo, pronouns are he, him in Texas, wants to talk about, wow, Sufism and physical divinity. So welcome.
Yeah, hi, Matt. I just wanted to say thanks. A long-time listener, I'm a jarhead. So after I got out of the Marines, I got involved in a mystical school, Apostate Prophet. And by the way, I follow all your stuff and keep up the good work. But I got involved in a mystical school, and they used a lot of dervish techniques, and they had music that was associated with the ceremony, zikr, you probably know it as. And I guess I got just a kind of a nostalgic idea about what Sufism is. And, you know, you can throw in American Sufism and Sufi Sam and a whole crew from San Francisco. And I just wondered if, you know, if you had an opinion that might poke my revelatory experience. I felt like during that time, I was really invested in drawing down the barakah, drawing the spirit down into my body so that I can have a physical sensation of divinity. And I think I had that. Now I can, you know, 20 years later, 40 years later, you know, I can provide naturalistic explanations of what happened to me. But still, I've got this romantic idea about Sufis, Turkey, and dervishes, and the spiritual dimension of Islam, and all of that, you know.
So that's Marlo, I'm kind of lost because I have no idea what spiritual means. I have no idea what you're talking about when you say spirituality. Okay. I have no idea what your experience is or how you reached a conclusion, because I've been high and I've felt incredibly weird things. I've also meditated, and I've been contemplative. And when I experience something, it seems to me that you think you're describing something supernatural. Is that correct?
Yes. Well,
how on earth could you reach a conclusion that anything you've ever experienced is supernatural in origin? Nobody's ever demonstrated what supernatural is. There's no demonstration that the supernatural exists. There's no demonstration that the supernatural can or does impact the natural in any way. So given that situation, how did you reach the conclusion that your experience was supernatural in origin?
Well, because by following the techniques, I could repeat the experience. That was one reason.
A repeatable experience. No, sir, Marlo. Listen to me. Okay. Listen to me. A repeatable experience does not mean that it's supernatural. So are you going to answer the question that I asked, or are you going to keep answering other questions that I didn't ask? What is the reason to conclude that the experience is supernatural?
I take your point, Matt, and I would like to hear Apostate Prophet's ideas.
No, sir. No, sir, Marlo. You didn't take my point. Marlo, you didn't take my point. I asked a question. You didn't answer it. You answered some other question. And you don't get to say, I take your point, but I want to hear what Apostate Prophet has to say. I want to hear what he has to say too. But first, I want you to either answer the question that you were asked, or admit or acknowledge that you don't have an answer to that, and then we can move on.
Okay, I'll do my best to answer your question, Matt.
Okay.
How do I conclude it was a supernatural experience? Well, I did include the idea that I can explain it with naturalism, but the supernatural, you mean like something outside of myself? I mean, Sufis would suggest that this is a spirit that comes from within. It's not supernatural.
So Marlo, if I ask you a question about how you reached a conclusion, why on earth would you sit there and follow it up by, shut the fuck up and listen for a second. Why would you sit there and follow it up by saying you don't know what I mean? I asked you if you reached the conclusion it was supernatural. You said yes. When I asked what the justification was for reaching the conclusion it's supernatural, that's what I want an answer to. Why would you ask me what my definition is when it's your definition? You had an experience, you think it's supernatural. All I want to know is how you reached that conclusion. That's it. Yeah. Answer the question that was asked.
How did I reach the conclusion? Because I had a physical experience, like in the Baptist church. I'm a Baptist. So like in the Baptist church, I had an experience and I was told it was an experience of God. And since it was in my body rather than some intellectual construct, for that time, I accepted the fact that it was God, and that was the explanation for it. Now, but I don't necessarily think that God is supernatural, and I don't think that experience that happened is necessarily supernatural. Did I sidestep you?
Here's the thing, Matt. Here is the issue. I think Marlo already kind of answered his own question at the beginning by saying that he can, understand it through naturalistic explanations nowadays too, but that there's still some tendency to interpret this as a spiritual or supernatural experience or something that comes from within. And I think I can relate to that because I myself participated in Sufi practices when I was a Muslim for a short period of time because my parents happened to be into Sufism as well. And the thing is, it might seem extremely absurd from the outside, when you look at it, but when you are within that and you engage in practices like forming a circle and moving repetitively and chanting words and names and all that, it really seems like something very fascinating is going on. The funny thing is, later when I don't use any recreational drugs nowadays because of past experiences, but later when I made experiences with getting high in different ways, including with psychedelics, I realized that that those feelings, those emotions can be experienced in many different ways, and that this is not unique to Sufi practices or to mystical or spiritual practices. On the contrary, I can even experience such high feelings when I go out for a walk on a beautiful day with my dog and look up to the sky and at trees, because I feel like I'm finding, I'm focusing on something outside of myself, escaping all my responsibilities and not focusing on myself and becoming, I don't know, I guess you could describe it as becoming one with the world outside you or with something greater. The thing is that something greater, which we feel close to, is not something divine. It's not something spiritual. It's not something that is actually above us. It is just something that transcends your focus on yourself. That feels good. That feels amazing. It stimulates something in your mind, but there is simply no reason to believe that it has that it comes from, I don't know, some spiritual world or anything like that.
Yes, I believe that. Hey, thanks for your good work. I really appreciate it, Matt. I'm glad to see you're healthy, and thanks for taking my call. It's my first call to Atheist Experience, so
thank you so much, man.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
Thanks. And by the way, side note, thank you for finally getting around to actually answering the question. All I ever want is, if I go to all the trouble, and I'm not going to beat you up further, Marlo, but if I go to all the trouble to ask a specific question, I just did a video about this called Answer the Fucking Question, or Answer the Damn Question. It's so frustrating when people answer a different question and I just keep trying to steer it back. And we finally got there, because what evidence do you have that your experience was supernatural? And you acknowledge, hey, I was a Baptist. I had this experience. I was told it was from God. I believed it. And so you're saying, oh, okay, now let me ask one final question, which will be really easy, Marlo. Because you were told that it was a God, does that mean it was a God?
I have to lean on a deist view here, and I don't want to say I'm walking outside and looking at the trees and the trees meet God or anything, but I think I'm kind of more, the way it fell out was deist. Like, there's a God, there's something behind it all, but
wow, Marlo, I thought you would learn to answer the question that was fucking asked, but clearly you haven't.
Hey,
goodbye.
Thank you,
Marlo.
The question was, just because somebody tells you that the explanation for an experience is God, does that mean it was? The answer is very simple. No. It doesn't mean it wasn't either. This was not a trick question. This was not anything that was difficult at all. And yet still, it's so hard to get people to answer the question.